Hey everybody, welcome back to Matthew Kelly Pottery. I hope you are doing well. Today we're going to talk about how to throw a pumpkin on the pottery wheel and also how to throw a gourd if that's something that you're interested in. I have never made a gourd before on the pottery wheel, and actually I've never made a pumpkin, at least for myself. I threw pumpkins when I worked for other people doing commissioned journeyman work, but I never made ones that I really thought looked amazing. And so I decided to make some and put a little bit more time and kind of artistic flair on them, as you can see with the really fancy twisted stems and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought I'd make a video and show you how I throw each of these, and then how I put a stem on one of these gourds, which would be basically the same as a pumpkin, but just a little bit of difference in the shape of the bottom piece. So anyway, let's go. Alright, one more note before we start the video and I actually show you how to make a pumpkin and a gourd and do all the decoration. That is, I'm having an online sale, a restock on my website starting this Friday at noon Eastern. If you watched the live stream of the unloading of my last gas kiln, most of that work will be on the website. If you missed that live stream, if I can figure out how, I'll put a link to the video here somewhere on the screen. If not, there'll be a link in the description. Don't normally do those kind of things. So anyway, this Friday at noon, patrons on my Patreon who qualify for getting early access to online sales, that will start at 6 p.m. on Thursday. Just wanted to give you that heads up. Online sale this coming Friday. That is September 6th, I believe, and then preview sale will be September 5th at 6 p.m. So if you're looking to buy anything from me, that is the best way to do it. And now on to the video. Alright, I have 3 pounds of clay here for each of these. I'm going to throw one pumpkin and one gourd and walk through the steps of how I throw those. Now, granted, these are not easy shapes to make because they, most people make them all in one piece where they close in the top and then make the stem out of the clay that's left at the top. That's fine. I've always wanted to make pumpkins and or gourds where they looked more realistic, and so in order to do that you have to add the stem on separately, because if you've ever looked at a pumpkin up close, and most of us have, and you may not have looked that closely at the stem, but the way it looks, it doesn't look like it's built in to the pumpkin. It looks like it's added on top. And so in order to get that look, I decided to make them separate. The first few pumpkins I made, I did close the form all the way off, and then realized later that I cut that back open anyway, so I thought, well, there's no real reason to close it all the way off unless I need to form the shape, because trapping the air inside sometimes will help you get the shape that you want. And then I realized I don't really have to do that, so I could keep more of the clay in the piece rather than having to cut that top off later. So these do have a bottom in them. The first few I made also, I left the complete bottom in and then cut a hole in the bottom later, or punched a hole. Then I thought, well, why don't I just put a hole in the bottom like a planter while I'm making them? Then I don't have to worry about putting a hole in it later. So go ahead and put a hole in the bottom like it's a planter. Now the great thing about pumpkins and or gourds is that if you're a perfectionist, this is a chance for you to not have to be a perfectionist, although I still mentally had to battle that, because I thought, man, I want these to look a certain way. And yeah, when we pick out pumpkins, we're looking for a certain pumpkin, you know, we'd like for one to look a certain way, but we put up with a lot of flaws because we know it's something that's natural. And so I think we would do well in making these if we would be like, hey, you know what, it doesn't have to be perfectly squatty or perfectly round, or, you know, it can have a few flaws here and there because we're trying to mimic something that grows naturally, and nothing that grows naturally is going to be without flaws, I should say. So I'm trying to pull some of the weight out of these, but I definitely want to leave a little bit in there because I know I'm going to belly this out to make the pumpkin first. And I want to leave some extra clay here at the top, so as I start to bring that back in, I have that clay there where it won't buckle on me as I bring that back in. I think my favorite pumpkins that I have made are the squattier ones, but that's just probably a personal preference. So we'll see if we can make a bit more of a squatty one here. The key there is to not try to get the full shape on the first go around. You can see on that last pull that I did, I started to shape it out a little bit, and then I just got to go a little bit at a time, being careful not to push it too far out or be too extreme, especially there at the base. You know, about an inch or two up from the bottom, you've got probably the weakest point that it could be, because you've got all the weight bearing down on that spot there. And I could, if I wanted to, use a torch down there to stiffen that up a bit, so I could go a little bit more extreme with the squattiness of it, but if I can get away with it not having to do that, that's even better. Now granted, even at this point, I have had one that I collapsed because I had it really squatty, like, you know, out like this, and then I went to closing the top and I was applying a lot of pressure, and that caused it to fall. So you have to be aware of that as well. So now that I have that, you know, bellied out, I want to bring this back in. Good thing is I don't have to bring this in like really far. I brought mine in on my other ones all the way into probably just maybe an inch or a little bit over of an opening. But the way that I've been making the gourds and the pumpkins, I put a pretty wide base on the stem that goes on the top, so I don't really have to worry about closing this off to a really tiny hole. So that's probably more than enough there. You can see I was able to keep it from collapsing and make it really wide like that. Alright, well, there is the shape for the pumpkin that I'm going to go with for this one, and then we'll throw the shape for the gourd, and then get to doing the decoration on one of them. Alright, so my goal with the gourd was to get a little bit of a skinnier cylinder pulled to begin with, because I knew I wasn't going to make it as fat as the pumpkin. Mainly because there's a second weak point in the gourd, and that is where you make the bottom belly, and then you come in for where you're going to do the top bump. And I have made quite a few vases as far as like a gourd vase, and so this is not necessarily something new to me, other than, you know, not really finishing the top and then coming back and doing all the decoration, the lines in it, the decoration. You have to be careful not to push the bottom out too far, because until you get the top made, it's kind of similar to making a small neck vase. Until you make that neck on it, you don't realize how wide you've made the belly of it until you squeeze in the top, and then you're like, ooh, I didn't really have to make it that wide. And also it gets harder because, like I said, you can see here the weak point that will develop right in this area here. You can already see there's a little bit of a wobble there just from me doing that. So you have to be very careful about not stressing that point, that stress point there too much. And also I want to come back down here and check the base. Like I said, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and so I'm gonna, want it to be looking good, throughout the whole, every step of the process, even though I'm making something to mimic something that grew in nature, as I said earlier, which would never be perfect. So, like I said, the biggest key on bringing anything in at the top is to leave some extra clay there so that you have something to work with that's not going to buckle. And you can also, as you bring in, and then you can pull up a little bit and then bring it in, because it thickens a bit as you bring it in. Same, the inverse of like as you spread clay out on the wheel, it gets thinner, even if you're not pulling it. This, as you bring it in, will get thicker. You're condensing it back down. All right, and there is a gourd shape. So we'll cut here, and I'll go grab one of the gourds that I made. I made 6 or 7 gourds yesterday, the base of them just like this one, and so they're ready to do the decoration on. I'll grab one of them, and we'll do the lines and the stem on that, and then you could just mimic that for a pumpkin. But that's what I have ready to actually put the lines and the stem on. So I'm going to show you how I do that on one of the gourds. And then we'll call it a day. Alright, this might be a little difficult for you to see. I don't know. Still have both cameras set up. I spun my wheel around because there was no way to put the lights behind me when my back's against that wall over there. And I've got 2 lights kind of over each shoulder so that it can light the pot up so you can see. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. If not, obviously you're going to have to figure this out, how it works for you best anyway. And that you're only going to do that by trying it yourself. Because, on YouTube you can't feel how stiff the pot is. You can't, all these different things that, you just have to kind of figure out on your own. So, anyway, I've tried it 2 ways. I've tried it leaving attached to the bat, making all the lines in it, then cutting it off and doing the bottom. I've tried doing the bottom and then doing the rest. It doesn't really matter. I think I probably prefer doing all the lines on it, then cutting it off and doing the bottom. But like I said, it's kind of, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You do need to kind of know how many indents or lines you're putting on them, because as you go to make the stems, you're going to want the stems to kind of line up with how many lines you're doing. So what I did the first time I made them, I didn't count. I just happened to make all of them with 6 lines other than one. I had one pumpkin with 7 lines, and when I made the stem and I put it on top, and there wasn't a little point for every line, and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, okay, I got to make another one with 7. So from then on, I was like, all right, I'm going to start with 6. And so 6 is pretty easy to do, to divide up without having to do all kinds of measuring, because you can start with, I'm doing these on a square bat, so I'm going to start with one line at one point, spin it all the way around 50 degrees, or halfway around 180 degrees, do a line straight across from that one, And then in between those two, I need to do 2 more lines and then do the other side. So the first 2 are easy because you're going to get them straight across from each other, and then dividing up the other sections, each half, into 2 more sections or 2 more lines. 3 sections with 2 lines. You get what I'm saying. So anyway, let's just get started, right? So anyway, so I start by kind of, these have to be fairly stiff. I start by kind of laying out the line with just doing an indent all the way down. I have found if you just start by doing pushing in like this, you can hit softer and harder spots. I can't talk today. And if you're applying a certain amount of pressure and then you hit a soft spot, you're gonna like jam your finger in, and it can look kind of funky. So I kind of figured out that if I did a line with kind of indents like this, just go all the way down and back up with my finger just kind of pushing in where I want that line to be. And I am going to curve this down around the bottom, but for now I'm going to do the lines like that, and then I will come back after I finish all of them and cut it off the bat and do the bottom. So there's the first line. Hopefully you can see. So what I'm going to do then is spin it 180 degrees halfway around, and then just kind of line up the other one. Maybe I'll try to do this with my left hand if that helps the camera over my right shoulder to see this. I am right-handed, so it's not as easy to do. The stiffer these are, in a way it makes it easier so that you don't like mess it up while doing this, but if it's too stiff, then it's really hard to do the indent, so you kind of have to find a balance there for you. And most likely the bottom is going to be softer than the top, just because these, like I said, I made them yesterday, let them dry a little while out, and then I put them under plastic, and then covered them up for a little while earlier, and then just covered them back up while I was throwing the other 2 that you just saw. So anyway, there's the first 2 lines. You can already start to see it's taking shape. Now I'm going to divide this half here into 3 sections with 2 more lines. I just kind of eyeball that and then go for it. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect because this is we're trying to mimic something growing in nature. But you know, you don't want it too far off, because when I go to do my stem, you know, if I get this way off, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to add the stem. All right, there is the third line. Now that last one is going to be easy, because then I can just divide this last bit in half, go right down the middle of that one to do my last line. Most of the pumpkins I think I've made in the past when I made some for other people, like when I was throwing production for other people. I pretty much made the piece, and then as it was still on the wheel, right after I made it, I would maybe use a rib, like the sharper edge of a rib, and do some lines in it. And like I said, it's like if you're gonna make a pumpkin and you're not putting a lot of time into the details, that's definitely one way to do it. You don't even have to put lines or grooves in them, but when you look at a real pumpkin in real life, they've got deeper grooves than just a little bitty line up the side. Or you know, obviously it depends on the pumpkin, depends on the gourd, and I'm not sure the gourds even have stripes like pumpkins. And I don't know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. Either way, I'm the first one I made of these. I thought that looks amazing, so I'm gonna make some more. So my gourds have grooves in them. They're groovy gourds. So even if normal gourds don't have grooves, mine do. So okay. Anyway, enough with the Bob Ross conversation about things being natural and why I'm doing, you know, all the little steps. But that one there, I was able to kind of like push my finger in most of the way without doing too much of the indenting first. It really depends on the stiffness of the clay and how evenly the walls are pulled. Because if you, like I said, if you had a thin spot right in here and you were doing that line, like I said, you could then be applying a certain amount of pressure, and then when you got to that point, it would really indent, and then it's really hard to get that back out, the dent, to even it back out. So either applying lighter pressure until you kind of feel where the thin spots are, or do the indent method and then come back with your finger and do a line like this. All right, and you can kind of see there where this spot here was pulled way down in versus that one. So kind of even the top back up a little bit. And so there's that. There's all 6 lines going down the side, divided it fairly evenly. And kind of fix the top back so it's kind of level there. All right, now I'm going to wire this off to do the bottom. And in doing the bottom, you'll be able to see that's where I've got the hole already in the bottom. I'm just going to take my finger first and kind of try to smooth up that edge where I just cut it off. This is another reason you got to wait till they're stiffened up a little bit, because I wouldn't be able to handle this in my hand like this if it was too soft. Of course, you could always let it stiffen up on the bat a little bit more before you do this part of it. I'm going to just kind of smooth up that hole there. And then I like to continue these down around the bottom and kind of indent the bottom a little bit, and then make an indent where each of these kind of come down around, so it kind of makes it look even more realistic in the sense that that curve goes all the way underneath the pumpkin or the gourd. That makes the bottom want to kind of push out a little bit. So after I finish these, then I'm going to want to indent the bottom back up like that there. So then the only thing that's really going to be touching down here will be these kind of 6 little feet here that I've made on the bottom. But then you've got kind of that same pattern. And you can come back and smooth this up a little bit later too, after the whole thing stiffens up a little bit. But now, let me use my putty knife, clean that off, and now I can set that back down on the wheel. And there, if you can see, now you've got that line goes all the way down and kind of, goes underneath the gourd, so it makes it look a little bit more realistic. All right. Now I'm going to go for the stem. Let me grab some clay and show you that. All right, I think this was 1.25 pounds, and I just cut it in half. So that 1.25 pounds would be 5/4, so that means this is 5/8 of a pound. So if that makes any sense. Anyway, a little over 1/2 pound. So I'm going to just start out by making a basic cone shape in my hand. You could do that by rolling it on the wheels or rolling it on a flat surface, but applying more pressure in one toward the tip here versus the bottom. And then I also want to kind of flatten out the bottom and flare out the bottom. So the first few stems I made were a little bit smaller than this, and this one is still kind of big, but I'm going to cut some of this away. So I realized that I wanted to make the stems a little bit larger, and so then I made a couple that I didn't hollow anything out, and I thought, ooh, that's kind of thick. That's going to need to dry for a while. So instead of cutting any of this out, I basically just took this shape, and then I jammed my finger up in there and then kind of twirled around to kind of hollow that out a bit. Not worried about trying to make it super thin or super hollowed out, but just get rid of the bulk of that was thick right down in this kind of, bottom couple inches of the stem. All right. Now I want to, before I do any more shaping, before I apply it, I want to actually cut the facets in the stem. And so I'm going to do that with my wire tool that I have. So I have this wire tool here that I've used for a few of my faceted or twisted bowls, and I like to use this because it's a wire stretched between a curved piece of metal, so it gives me just, you could basically, like a cheese cutter, you could use this. And what I'm going to do then is just hold this in my left hand, and then I'm going to use my right hand to then carve a facet here, turn it all the way around, and get 6 facets carved all the way around on the stem. And that's not, not super easy to get all 6 that way, but I've made enough of them now that it seems like it's going pretty well. So trying to get the cut all the way from top to bottom like that, peel it away so that then I have a facet. And this one, I know that's a bit wider than I need the whole thing, but then my next one is gonna cut into this one a little bit as I make the next facet. Second one. And third one. So now I know I'm halfway. Fourth one. And then I kind of look at how much I got left. Fifth one. And sixth one. Okay. So now I have my facets, and I cut away a good, at least 1/4 pound there, or close, something like that. So that made this a lot thinner as well. So now I have this design here with all the facets on it. And so you can already see how that's going to look better than the other thing I had. But now what I want to do is I want to, everywhere there's one of these lines, I want to make that into a point. And so what I've started doing for that is actually just pushing in between each one of them. Rotate, push in, rotate, and push it in. And then I'm going to come back and basically mold that into a point. So now I have this kind of look all the way around. And then I'm going to start molding that into a point on each one of those. Oh, I should have this. Sorry, it's probably out of focus. Sorry about that. I set the focus to stay because I didn't want my arm getting in the way to change the focus, and then I just realized that maybe it was out of focus there for a little bit. But either way, you get the point. You get the point. Sorry, I'm just full of all kinds of puns today. Not good ones, but puns nonetheless. All right, so I'm wanting those points, and then I want a little curve in between so that it makes, a little 6-starred pattern that I can then set on top, and each of those points are going to go down into a groove, and each of the curved parts are going to go over top where one of the belly sections are. Okay? And then before I add it back onto the piece, I want to then kind of, actually I think I did this on the, once it's on the piece a little bit as well, but I'm going to just kind of push those in a little bit just to give me a little indent in those as well. All right, now I'm going to get some slip and add a bunch of slip to the base of this so that I can attach it to the top. I'm going to add way more than I need because I can clean the excess off, but I just want to add a bunch of slip so that it can help fill in all those gaps. Now, good thing is this got a hole in the bottom and the top, so no matter what I do, it's not trapping air. And then I'm going to, I probably should reposition the camera so it's up above now. Let me do that before I add. All right, we got that camera positioned above now so that hopefully you can see as I work on this from above. Still got the one on the side. I don't know if we'll be in dual angle mode at this point. But anyway, so now I have the slip all the way around that, and then I'm going to position this so that I get a point going down in each of the facets, or each of the grooves. I want one of these points to go down in each one of those. And in between those, I can kind of push those back in a little bit. Now, something that might help you that I didn't do would be probably pull up a picture of a real pumpkin or a real gourd. But all right, I think I've got all those on there pretty good now. Clean off some of the excess slip. All right, now one of the things that I do have is, because this is six-sided, I can't really pull this all that easily, but I can slightly kind of stretch it or pull it. And so what I did by that is, as I just did two fingers at a time, which can give me four grooves. So I pick like this one and this one are across from each other, and this one and this one are across from each other. So I can kind of do those four at once and just pinch together and pull up. Oop, I kind of messed up that one over there a little bit, but pinch together and pull up, and then I can actually just do two fingers on this one and this one, pinch those together and pull up. And so I kind of get to pull it a little bit, and you could also just rotate, because I want those grooves in there so that when I twist the stem, I get those, kind of like making a twisted bowl or a twisted mug. I get that twist to kind of show up in the finished piece by having all that twist in the stem. Sorry, I pulled it out of frame there so you can't even see. There's the twisted stem on there. All right, so pretty much have that attached, have it pulled a little bit, and now I get to do the twist, and however you want to twist it. It's a bit harder to twist down here than it is when you get to the tip, so I like to start down here, kind of bend it over and get it twisting. Most of the time I've liked to start twisting one way, and I continue the twist of the stem that way, but then I like to kind of curve that stem back. So continue the rotation of the twist, but then change the direction that the whole stem is twisting. And however that goes, whether you're twisting the stem counterclockwise or clockwise, and then, like I said, just as I start that rotation, try not to mess up the actual look and the facets in that. So you can kind of see I already have that cool twisted look to the stem already there. But then I want to, as it gets down, kind of bend that over, continue to twist the stem, but then I want to curve this back the other direction. So kind of get it bending down, but then go back like the other direction, but continue to twist that stem so that you're getting a spiral and a twist all in one in the stem. Kind of bend it down. And if you feel comfortable, more comfortable with attaching it back to the edge of the piece, you could do that. Obviously, as this dries, it's going to pull in and shrink, so it might pull away from that. A lot of potters I've seen will come back later and add vines and leaves and all kinds of stuff to them. I think I've decided to just keep them as pumpkins and gourds with just the stem. Because anytime I've ever bought one, it just has a stem on it. I've never bought one that had leaves and vines on it. So, also just trying to make it look really nice, but also keep it simple. And that's something so that I don't take hours and hours working on something, because I still have to make a living while selling them as well. Well, there you have it. There is the gourd that we just finished putting the lines and the stem on. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you give it a shot. And if you do, and you enjoyed the process and you get something you're proud of, send me a picture either on Instagram or Facebook's probably the best way to send me messages and send me pictures. But I hope you learned something, like I said, and I hope you give it a shot. Let your artistic creativity run wild and do as much or as little decoration as you want to do. And no matter how you're firing it, how you're finishing it, I'd love to see your finished product if you're proud of it. And on that note, I will be having a sale sometime probably in October to sell some of these either in my shop or online or both. And so if you're interested in one, this is the first pumpkins and gourds I've ever made. And I don't know what I'm going to sell them for yet, what kind of price, but they're not going to be super cheap because they're quite a lot too of making them. So anyway, like I said, thank you for being here. I appreciate all the support on the videos, on Patreon, all the ways that you guys support me. And yeah, hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Bye.